nothing. He's nothing. He's a pervert for now. But all these years, I said, once they kill, they don't stop. He had no right to kill my daughter.
On March 10th, 1991, in the heart of Nashville, Tennessee, a trail of shattered lives and unanswered questions unfolded. The lifeless body of Pamela Rose McCall, a 33-year-old woman, was discovered near a wooded knoll Saturn Parkway by a passing motorist. Despite extensive efforts, the investigation into her death yielded no leads or answers. For 3 decades, the circumstances surrounding her demise remained a mystery, leaving her loved ones and investigators searching for elusive clues. What would be the cause of her death? How did the investigators finally solve the case? Welcome back to Real Crime Story, where we cover solved, unsolved, and mysterious cases from across the globe. Nashville, the capital of Tennessee, is a vibrant city known for its rich musical heritage and cultural allure. Home to the iconic Grand Ole Opry and the legendary Music Row, Nashville beckons music lovers from around the world. The city's vibrant downtown area is adorned with honky-tonks and live music venues, offering a lively atmosphere. Beyond its musical roots, Nashville boasts historic landmarks, diverse culinary experiences, and a thriving art scene. With its southern charm and hospitable spirit, Nashville continues to captivate visitors and residents alike. This city has held the mystery of murder of a young woman for 30 long years. But first, let's start where it all began. Born in the city of Cedar Rapids in 1958, Pamela Rose Aldridge McCall hailed from a family deeply rooted in Iowa. As the cherished daughter of Marsha Ray Lyle, Pamela entered the world when her mother was just 17 years old. No information about her father is available. Growing up, Pamela enjoyed the company of her 4 brothers, forming a tight-knit bond. With a large extended family surrounding her, Pamela experienced the warmth and support of a close network. As life unfolded, Pamela's path led her to Virginia, where she embarked on her educational journey. Attending Middlesex High School, she faced unique challenges but remained determined. Although she left school at the age of 16, Pamela's thirst for knowledge led her to explore nursing school briefly, embracing the potential for a fulfilling career in healthcare. Pamela, a joyful and carefree spirit, was known for her spontaneous adventures and love for hitchhiking. She had a kind and respectful nature, treating everyone with care and consideration. In her early 20s, Pamela found love and married a truck driver named Stephen Grace from Pennsylvania. Their love story blossomed as they welcomed a precious baby boy into their lives. However, Pamela's free-spirited nature made it challenging for her to settle down. The constraints of a traditional life proved difficult for her to bear, and she longed for the freedom to follow her own path. The demands of raising a child always necessitate stability, but with Stephen's occupation as a truck driver, it kept him away for extended periods, and they faced the challenge of providing their son with the care he needed. As a result, the responsibility of raising their child fell largely upon his paternal grandparents, who lovingly stepped in to offer their support. Despite Pamela and Stephen's best efforts, eventually their marriage ended in divorce. After the divorce, Pamela began life on her own, and in 1991, she was living independently, looking ahead to her future. But little did she know that the future was one that she would never get to see. On March 2, 1991, Marsha Lyle engaged in a conversation with her beloved daughter, Pamela. She laughed and talked joyfully over the payphone in Tennessee. Blissfully unaware of the impending tragedy, Pamela assured her mother that she would be home in a few days. Little did they know that this seemingly ordinary conversation would be their final exchange. One quiet afternoon on March 10, 1991, the Spring Hill Police Department received an urgent call. A passerby motorist came across what he thought was a sleeping woman, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a motionless, almost naked body of an adult female. The discovery took place near Saturn Parkway, close to Interstate 65, specifically near the off-ramp for Port Royal Road. This location was about 40 miles south of the lively city of Nashville. As law enforcement rushed to the location, amidst the woodline, they found the body of a Caucasian woman. The chilling aspect of the discovery was unsettling. The manner in which the victim was positioned seemed almost deliberate, as if the perpetrator had taken pride in displaying his heinous act. Upon searching the whole area, the investigators didn't find any identification or personal belongings of the victim nearby. They quickly deduced that the location where her remains were found was not the site of her untimely demise. Her clothing showed signs of being torn, with her garments in a state of disarray. Tragically, visible injuries marred her face and neck, which indicated a violent encounter. After meticulously documenting the evidence at the scene, the authorities transported the body to the medical examiner's office for a thorough autopsy. Her fingerprints were collected and cross-referenced in the system, which resulted in a positive identification. Through this crucial step, they confirmed that the victim was Pamela Rose McCall. The identification provided investigators with a starting point to delve deeper into her life and potential connections. Upon the completion of the autopsy, investigators were met with a shocking revelation. It was discovered that Pamela had been 24 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. The medical examiner's report determined that she had been strangled and her neck was broken, which had led to her demise. Disturbingly, the state of her clothing and garments strongly indicated the possibility of violence, suggesting that Pamela may have been assaulted before being murdered. To gather further evidence, the torn clothing and garments were sent to a forensics laboratory for thorough examination. After the examination, they found some bodily fluid on the pantyhose that she had been wearing. From that fluid, a DNA sample was successfully recovered, which was believed could be the DNA of the killer. The recovered DNA sample was then sent to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. However, due to the limited advancements in DNA technology in 1991, lab technicians were unable to find a match. The sample they had was too small, and law enforcement databases were not as extensive as they are today. Recognizing the potential for future technological developments, the DNA, along with the clothing and other evidence, was carefully preserved in a secure container. During their investigation, investigators diligently sought out potential suspects. They approached people in the vicinity where Pamela McCall's body was discovered, asking people if they had noticed anything unusual between the time of her last known sighting and the discovery of her body. However, the information gathered was limited. Witnesses mentioned that Pamela had been traveling with a truck driver. Several individuals recalled seeing Pamela at a truck stop a few days before her body was found on March 10, 1991. At the time, she had been engaged in a heated conversation with a driver of a semi-truck. Unfortunately, none of the witnesses could provide detailed descriptions of the truck or the driver, which made it challenging for investigators to narrow down their search to a specific suspect. The lead detective in Pamela's case, Spring Hill Police Captain Ron Coleman, explained that having a definite suspect at that time was crucial. The DNA sample they had was too small, and replicating it for analysis would have destroyed the original sample. Instead, a decision was made to wait for technology to advance further and provide better opportunities for investigation. Unfortunately, this meant the case gradually went cold, with no significant breakthroughs in the investigation. As the years went by after her daughter's death, with no further leads in the case, Marcia Lyle struggled to cope with the pain of her loss. In 2007, she moved from her Gloucester, Virginia home to another house in part to get away from the sad thoughts. But she was never at peace, waiting for Pamela's killer to be found. In 2019, Patrolman Ty Hadley of the Spring Hill Police Department stumbled upon a book that sparked an unexpected conversation. The book, titled In the Name of the Children, was found on a desk in the office of his colleague and evidence technician manager, Melissa Wilson. Even though Hadley wasn't really into true crime, he unexpectedly showed an interest in solving a cold case. He found the idea quite thrilling. Upon hearing this, Melissa revealed that their department actually had such a case with a lot of evidence. Little did they know that their conversation would play a crucial role in the investigation of a nearly 3-decade-old homicide case within their jurisdiction. The investigation was reopened in 2019, and being curious to delve into the details of this case, Hadley and Melissa visited the Detective Criminal Investigation Division closet at the back of the police department. They discovered a comprehensive case file filled with extensive notes, initial autopsy reports, crime scene photographs, and various paperwork. The file also contained forms from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, or TBI, indicating earlier attempts to gather evidence. Hadley was taken aback by the size of the file, but remained determined to uncover the truth, and he meticulously studied its contents. Little did he know he was about to deal with Pamela McCall's murder case. For their investigation, Hadley and Wilson proceeded to the department's evidence room located at City Hall. There, they retrieved a box containing crucial pieces of evidence from Pamela's case. Among the items carefully preserved were the torn clothing worn by the victim, her pantyhose, clippings from her fingernails, and the enigmatic DNA sample. Each item held the potential to shed light on the mysterious circumstances surrounding the case. Their investigation led them to gather gas station records from different truck stops in the Nashville area at the time of Pamela's death in 1991. Given that Pamela's body was found near Nashville and she was last seen with a trucker, the investigators believed that the trucker would have stopped at a gas station in the time frame around her death. While they didn't have anything specific to compare the records to at that moment, they understood the significance of having this information on hand for future reference. Despite lacking substantial evidence to progress their investigation, the investigators redirected their attention to the mysterious DNA sample recovered from the victim's clothing. In 2019, they decided to send the DNA sample to the Wyoming Forensic Department for testing, hoping that advancements in technology would yield new insights and potentially lead them closer to solving the case. The lab entered the DNA sample in the national database, and it resulted in a match with a suspect involved in numerous other murder cases. The nature of these deaths shared similarities with the murder of Pamela McCall. Further investigation led to the identification of the suspect as Clark Perry Baldwin from Tennessee. Clark Baldwin, the suspect in the case, had a diverse background. He was raised in Nashua, Iowa, and completed his education at Nashua Plainfield High School in 1979. As an adult, he resided in various towns, including Nashua, Missouri, Waterloo, Virginia, Newport News, and Springfield. Baldwin worked as a long-haul trucker for Martin Transport for several years, including during the time period when the murder took place in the 1990s. After Baldwin's career as a long-haul trucker in the 1990s, he settled in Newport News, Virginia, where he started working as a taxi driver for the Orange Cab Company. Baldwin was also in a relationship with Rochelle Bobenmoyer, who already had 5 children. They got married in December 1987. However, their marriage was troubled, and they got divorced shortly afterward. According to Bobenmoyer's daughter, Jamie Jones, now 43 years old, who lived with Baldwin from ages 3 to 6, her experience with him was far from positive. She stated that all 5 children in the family suffered from Baldwin's mistreatment. In 1991, Baldwin was arrested and charged with assaulting a 21-year-old woman in Wheeler County, Texas. The victim reported being held at gunpoint while hitchhiking and subjected to physical violence. Baldwin confessed to the crime during questioning by investigators. However, before the grand jury hearing, the victim disappeared, making it impossible to proceed with the case. Prosecutors decided to drop the charges against Baldwin due to the lack of the victim's testimony. This incident was not the last time Baldwin's name was linked to criminal activities. In 1997, Baldwin was involved in a more straightforward legal case that led to his imprisonment. The Secret Service received information that Baldwin was producing counterfeit U.S. currency using his personal computer. After confirming the tip's validity, agents obtained a search warrant for Baldwin's residence in Springfield, Missouri. They then conducted a raid, which resulted in the arrest of Baldwin and 2 female associates. Baldwin was charged with counterfeiting and subsequently was sentenced to 18 months in jail. He was later released in 1999. Following his release, Baldwin remained off the investigators' radar until recent developments in the murder case of Pamela. In a surprising turn of events, investigators discovered that there were 2 other cases in Wyoming from March and April 1990 that bore similarities with Pamela's case. One of these cases involved Barbara Leviton, who found the frozen body of a naked white female at a lay-by near Bitter Creek, Wyoming, on March 1, 1992. She alerted the authorities, who concluded that the body had been thrown from a westbound vehicle on the highway. The unidentified female victim was later named Bitter Creek Betty, and her time of death was estimated to be between October 1991 and February 1992. Despite efforts to establish her identity, even fingerprints and facial recognitions yielded no new leads. The medical examiner determined that she had been strangled and potentially assaulted. Additionally, no missing persons reports matched her description, leaving her identity a mystery. DNA extracted from her clothing was believed to belong to the perpetrator, who likely had type O blood. The investigators also focused on her rose tattoo and traced it back to a Tucson tattoo parlor near the Triple T truck stop. They conducted some interviews which yielded limited information, and even hypnosis of the tattoo artist provided no significant leads. The identity of the victim remained unknown, and the case unsolved. With the investigation at a standstill, Bitter Creek Betty was buried in an unmarked grave at Rest Haven Memorial Gardens in Rock Springs, Wyoming. 6 weeks after the discovery of Bitter Creek Betty's body on April 13, 1992, highway workers found another female victim in a barrow ditch near Sheridan County. The fully clothed victim had no obvious cause of death, and the area provided no clues for identification. The remains were taken to the medical examiner's office, where her fingerprints were taken and sent for analysis. The medical examiner estimated her time of death to be in February 1992, with cause of death being blunt force trauma to the head. The autopsy also indicated that she was also assaulted. Despite fingerprint checks and searches in missing persons databases, her identity remained unknown, leading to her being called Sheridan County Jane Doe, or I-90 Jane Doe. A profile was created to help identify the victim, including a reconstructed image. Investigators released her description as a Caucasian female, approximately 5'5" or 5'6" inches tall, weighing around 110 to 115 pounds, with dark brown eyes. Despite efforts, her identity was never revealed, and the case remained unsolved. She was later buried as Sheridan County Jane Doe in Rock Springs, Wyoming. In April 2020, investigators made a significant breakthrough when they located Baldwin, now 58 years old, residing in Waterloo, Iowa. However, before proceeding with an arrest, they needed to confirm that the DNA evidence found on Pamela's clothing indeed matched Baldwin's. To gather concrete evidence, state and federal officials embarked on a covert operation. For 10 days, they put Baldwin's apartment under surveillance and closely monitored his activities. One morning, Baldwin visited a local Walmart store and retrieved a shopping cart. After he left, the FBI discreetly gathered the DNA samples from the shopping cart that he used. Additionally, they seized various items discarded by Baldwin outside his apartment, including a peach can, orange peelings, and a soda. These items were carefully collected as potential evidence in their ongoing investigation. Then, without any delay, the investigators submitted the evidence in May 2020 to the lab for analysis. When the result came back, they found a match between Baldwin's DNA and the DNA found at the crime scenes of the two murders in Wyoming during the 1990s. The DNA evidence also specifically linked Baldwin to the bodily fluid and other materials recovered from Pamela's case, confirming his connection to this case as well. On May 6, 2020, law enforcement officers from local, state, and federal agencies made a journey of approximately 700 miles from Spring Hill, Tennessee, to northeastern Iowa. Their destination was Baldwin's apartment, located on the 6th floor of an 8-floor building. They also informed Lyrrell, Pamela's mother, that they were going to arrest the killer. She first thought that they were joking, but when the investigators explained the whole investigation, a sense of relief washed over her. During the interrogation at his apartment, which lasted for several hours, Baldwin revealed that he had been married in 1990, but was having an affair with Pamela, and she was carrying his child at the time of her murder. Prior to her body being discovered on March 10, 1991, they were traveling together when they got into an argument, leading Pamela to leave the truck in frustration. Baldwin admitted to then killing Pamela and leaving her body on Saturn Parkway in Nashville. After his arrest on May 6, 2020, at his apartment in Waterloo, Iowa, Baldwin faced charges for the murders of Pamela Rose McCall and her unborn baby. The bond was set at a staggering $1 million. Later, on May 15, 2020, Baldwin was extradited to the Maury County Jail in Tennessee. He awaited his trial, which was scheduled for either December 2020 or January 2021. During the arraignment, Judge David Allen appointed an attorney for Baldwin's case and scheduled a settlement date for September 8, 2020. According to Count Clerk Sandy McLean, Baldwin is currently in custody at Maury County Jail with a bond set at $1 million. In addition to the charges for the murders of Pamela and her unborn baby, Baldwin was anticipated to face charges for the other two murders in Wyoming. However, at present, no further information has been disclosed by the police regarding these additional charges. The investigation continues, and updates may follow as more details unfold. The satisfaction of finally solving this long unsolved case was immeasurable. It serves as a testament to the power of collaboration among law enforcement agencies nationwide. Chief Bright, who has been leading the department since 2010, expressed his gratitude for the joint efforts that led to this breakthrough. He emphasized the importance of good old-fashioned police work, which played a crucial role in bringing the truth to light. At 78 years old, Pamela's mother, residing in Virginia, carried the weight of her daughter's tragic loss.
He's nothing. He's nothing. He's a pervert from hell. He's just like the devil. I don't know how many women he's killed, but all these years I said once they kill, they don't stop. He had no right to kill my daughter. She was 7 months pregnant when he killed her. If she would have lived 3 hours, I'd had a beautiful granddaughter.
Throughout the years, she held on to the hope that her daughter's killer would be brought to justice and face the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. When Gertz, the officer, called her on the day of Baldwin's arrest, he delivered the long-awaited news. Overwhelmed with a mix of emotions, Pamela's mother's reaction was a powerful blend of relief, sorrow, and gratitude. In that moment, she found solace in the belief that God had blessed everyone involved in the case. This case, is an example of the achievement that showcases the remarkable results that can be achieved when the law enforcement work together towards a common goal. What are your thoughts on this case? Was justice truly served for Pamela's murder? We'd love to hear from you.
A beautiful nurse goes missing. Did she simply walk away from everyone she loved, or did someone make that decision for her?
Beyond death, nothing could keep her away from her kid.
On November 16, 2015, 28-year-old mother Peggy McGuire dropped off her son Ethan at school outside of Eufaula, just a 16-minute drive from the town. It was just like any other day, except that she never made it back home. Her last known communication was a phone call with her stepfather, Donnie Davis, where she mentioned she was driving home to where she lived with her son and his father, Thomas McIntosh. The investigation into her disappearance had been ongoing ever since, but with recent developments, the spotlight was once again put onto Peggy's vanishing. Where did Peggy McGuire disappear to after dropping off her son? What could have happened to her? Eufaula is a town located in Oklahoma, known for its rich history and scenic beauty. Situated near the shores of Lake Eufaula, the largest lake in Oklahoma, the town offers a variety of recreational activities such as boating, fishing, and camping. Eufaula is also home to historic sites and landmarks, including the Eufaula Dam and the Eufaula Indian community, which adds to its cultural significance. Who knew that this idyllic setting would also be the center of an unsolved mystery involving a young mother? Peggy McGuire was born in the year 1987 and spent her formative years in the idyllic town of Eufaula, Oklahoma. With her mother Betty Davis and stepfather Donnie Davis by her side, Peggy grew up surrounded by the beauty and simplicity of the country. Peggy was a true country girl, with a love for the land that ran as deep as her roots. Her love for the great outdoors knew no bounds, and she spent most of her days surrounded by the breathtaking beauty of Eufaula, Oklahoma. With a heart as big as her beloved herd of cattle, Peggy was a genuine and caring soul who radiated kindness wherever she went. She was known for her warm, bubbly personality and her infectious laughter, and everyone who met her couldn't help but be drawn to her friendly and outgoing nature. Her furry companion, a loyal dog, was her constant companion, and she also had a soft spot for her herd of 150 goats. In Eufaula, neighbors are more than just acquaintances. They're family. Elizabeth Leeper, Peggy's cousin, best friend, and co-worker, who lived a few miles away from Peggy's home, was always just a phone call away. Their bond was unbreakable, and Elizabeth knew that Peggy would be there for her, just as she always was.
How would you describe Peggy?
Just a really, really sweet, sweet soul. Big heart, cares about everyone.
But most of all, Peggy cared for a boy named Thomas McIntosh, whom she met in high school. She fell head over heels for Thomas, despite him being known for his abrasive personality and tendency to bully others. They shared a deep passion for the country lifestyle, with Peggy taking care of their animals and Thomas working as a ranch hand. But as time went on, it became clear that Thomas wasn't just unpleasant to be around. He was downright cruel to Peggy. He was notorious for his rudeness and social ineptitude, and his behavior often crossed the line into outright cruelty. Despite the abuse she endured, Peggy remained devoted to him, hoping that he would one day change his ways. Peggy's relationship with Thomas was far from the romantic ideal of two people in love.
She was beautiful, beautiful. She could have had any guy she wanted, and he was so awkward, rude, and unsocial.
Rather, it was marred by his intense jealousy, which often spiraled into uncontrollable rage. She was extremely sociable and had a lot of friends, both male and female. Whenever Peggy would speak with other male friends, Thomas would become consumed with anger, and his violent tendencies would emerge. He'd lash out by smashing her car windows, breaking down doors, and even punching holes in the walls. It was a frightening and abusive situation that left Peggy feeling trapped and alone. The couple was on and off constantly, and on one occasion, Peggy found herself battered and bruised after Thomas unleashed his frustration on her.
I don't know how many times he broke her windows out of her car, smashed the doors in.
Over jealousy.
Yeah.
She turned to her best friend Elizabeth to help to take her to ER, as her nose was bloodied and broken from the incident. Elizabeth urged Peggy to tell her what happened, and after some hesitation, Peggy revealed that during a lunch date with Thomas, he'd lost his temper, pulled out a gun, and struck her in the face with it. Despite the protection order in 2011, Peggy still had feelings for Thomas and believed that he would calm down and change for the better. She hoped that starting anew in Indiana with her baby boy Ethan and Thomas would bring them closer together. So they moved from Oklahoma to Indiana after Thomas got a new job there. Peggy was a loving, amazing, and devoted mother. Despite her struggles with Thomas, she remained devoted to her role as a mother and worked tirelessly to provide a happy and safe home for her family. This was seemingly the last straw for Peggy. She had finally mustered the courage to press charges against Thomas for his domestic abuse and violent behavior. She left Indiana and went back to live with her mother in Oklahoma. However, Thomas was not ready to let go of Peggy just yet.
When she came home from Indiana, she was broken and beaten, but I think something clicked in her finally that she was not going back.
He played on her emotions and made her believe that he would change his ways. With his persuasive tactics, he convinced Peggy to come back to him and drop the charges. Thomas had a way of twisting Peggy's thoughts and feelings, making her doubt herself and her decisions. He preyed on her love for their son, manipulating her with his phrases. Peggy was torn between her desire to protect herself and her son, and the guilt that ate away at her for keeping Ethan away from his father. Eventually, she caved in and went back to Thomas, hoping against hope that things would be different this time. This time, Thomas moved back to Oklahoma and bought a house, and the couple moved in together. Although they were living together, Peggy made it clear to Thomas that their relationship was only that of co-parents and nothing more. She did her best to keep a respectful distance from him, but Thomas had other ideas. He'd often tried to invade her personal space, making her feel uncomfortable and uneasy. Peggy knew deep down that this situation was not sustainable, but she was determined to do whatever it took to protect her son. But little did she know that this was just the beginning of a series of unfortunate events that would ultimately lead to her disappearance. Peggy saw her situation as an opportunity to pursue a career that would not only give her financial independence, but also a sense of purpose beyond just being a mother. Nursing seemed like the perfect fit for her caring and compassionate nature. Peggy poured herself into her studies and clinical rotations, often staying up late into the night to finish assignments and studying while Ethan slept. Her dedication and hard work paid off, and she graduated with honors in June 2013 and was immediately hired at Wellington Hills Nursing Center. She was finally able to provide a stable life for herself and her son. Peggy had been holding on to the hope of escaping Thomas's clutches for a long time.
She decided she was going to become a nurse and better her life for her and her little boy, and she didn't need him.
She knew that she had to get away for the safety of herself and her son. So she started making secret plans, moving her belongings little by little to her mother's house and finding a new place to live. She'd even started seeing other men, including a man named Richard from Texas, hoping to find someone who would treat her and Ethan with the love and respect they deserved. But fate had other plans for her, and she never got the chance to put her escape plan into action. On November 16, 2015, she called her stepfather to discuss plans for remodeling the back deck on the house. He said he needed measurements, and Peggy said that she'd call him back after she got them, but she never called him back. The day after Peggy's phone call with her stepfather, her absence at her niece's ball game sent waves of concern throughout her family and friends. They knew Peggy to be a devoted aunt who never missed a game or event. Panic set in when all attempts to contact her failed. Her phone remained on voicemail, and unanswered texts piled up. It was out of character for Peggy to disappear without a word. On Wednesday, November 18, 2015, Elizabeth still hadn't heard from her friend and decided to go check on her. The first stop was Thomas's house. Elizabeth was worried and decided to go wait at Ethan's school so she could see if Peggy would pick him up as she always did. She waited until school was out and saw that it wasn't Peggy, but Thomas who came to get Ethan. This was way out of the ordinary, and at that point, Elizabeth knew something was wrong.
So I'm sitting in the school parking lot and Thomas comes to pick up Ethan.
Elizabeth frantically searched for Richard's phone number, hoping he could provide any information about Peggy's whereabouts. When Richard picked up, Elizabeth's heart raced as she asked him about his date with Peggy the day before. Richard's voice was soft and apologetic as he explained that he had never made it to Oklahoma due to unforeseen complications, revealing he'd never seen Peggy the previous day.
I called Betty and I was like, you need to call the cops right now. She's not here. She should be. She was supposed to meet with this Richard guy.
Within hours of the report, they got their first break. Peggy's brother found her truck abandoned in the parking lot of a bar close to their house called T&J's Ice House off Highway 9. He immediately called the police and they rushed to the scene to investigate. As they looked over the abandoned vehicle, they noticed something strange on the surveillance video from the bar. On November 18, 2015, at 5:20 a.m., during a violent storm, Peggy's truck, a 2012 Toyota Tundra, had pulled into the parking lot, only to be abandoned by a mysterious figure who quickly disappeared into the darkness. The footage was too dark, and the storm caused visual issues as well, so they couldn't get a good view of who was driving the truck. It just looked like a person in a hoodie with the hood pulled up. They created flyers with Peggy's description that were passed out around the area. Her wavy blonde hair and striking blue eyes made her stand out in a crowd. Standing tall at 5 foot 10 inches and weighing between 140 to 160 pounds, Peggy had a scar on her right knee, pierced ears, and a tattoo on her lower back of a horseshoe with stars and a 4-leaf clover with faded initials JNS. As a missing person, it was crucial to get her information out to as many people as possible. With the news of Peggy's truck being found, Thomas rushed down to the bar to speak with the police. But when he arrived, instead of showing concern for Peggy's safety, he began speculating about her intentions. She must have run away, he said confidently. However, the police didn't share his optimism and continued their investigation. That was when the young Ethan allegedly told his family member something that could dispute his own father's story. Despite Thomas's troubled history, he wasn't named a suspect, and the authorities didn't seem to be doing much to find Peggy. The rumor started swirling around the small town of Eufaula that the sheriff's department appeared to be dragging their feet in the investigation. There were no formal interviews, no search warrants, no official searches for the missing mom. After 2 weeks of inaction from the McIntosh Sheriff's Department, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation was finally brought in to help with the case in December 2015. Special Agent Jenny Verdon wasted no time in addressing the suspicious evidence in Peggy's disappearance. She watched the surveillance video from T&J's Ice House over and over again, carefully studying every detail. Investigators reached out to her new boyfriend, Richard, hoping to gather more information about her last known whereabouts. Richard was cooperative and provided them with vital information that would help them in their investigation.
That friend verified that she told them that she was at home and that she was, making beef jerky.
You're referring to the guy she was dating?
Yes.
Is he the last person to talk to her?
Yes, as far as we know, he was.
He recalled having a phone conversation with Peggy after she dropped off her son Ethan at school. The investigators listened intently as Richard helped them piece together Peggy's last known movements. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, or OSBI, started by tracking Peggy's cell phone records, hoping it would lead them to some clues. They also wanted to find out where her phone last pinged to get an idea of her last known location. In addition to that, they planned to search Thomas's home and the surrounding areas to find any evidence that could lead them to Peggy's whereabouts. The team decided to start with Peggy's and Thomas's cell phone records, which showed their approximate locations on the morning of November 16, 2015. In the farming community where Peggy and Thomas lived, the townsfolk were buzzing with rumors about what could have happened to Peggy. As days turned into weeks, The focus of these conversations gradually shifted towards Thomas's strange behavior in the hours following Peggy's disappearance. One neighbor, who preferred to remain anonymous, said that they saw Thomas frequently driving around in his truck, looking anxious and restless. They combed through the tractor, searching for any trace of evidence that could connect Thomas to Peggy's disappearance. In their search, they found what could have been traces of blood or rust in the tractor bucket, but the wear and tear of time and weather made it difficult to confirm. The investigation wouldn't stop there, as OSBI obtained a search warrant for Thomas's house and vehicle. However, their search of Thomas's house proved to be more fruitful, as they discovered bloodstains on the couch, utility gloves, and a utility bucket. Though the samples were worn down after 3 long weeks, they were tested for DNA, but unfortunately, the results were inconclusive. The state investigation team geared up for what would be their most extensive search yet, with a fleet of drones hovering high above and helicopters circling the area. A team of cadaver dogs bounded eagerly across the rugged terrain. They meticulously combed through 80 sprawling acres of land in search of any clues that could lead to Peggy's whereabouts. It was a grueling task, but the investigators knew that covering every inch of ground was essential. Thomas also got an attorney who pulled out all the stops in the attempt to exonerate his client of any wrongdoing. He challenged the reliability of the witnesses' recollection, claiming that they must have confused the days due to the storm that hit the area. The defense attorney also sought to undermine the prosecution's case by questioning the nature of Peggy and Thomas's relationship. He suggested that the two were romantically involved, not just friends. Moreover, he said that the abuse accusations were unfounded since the charges and protection orders against Thomas were consistently dropped. He even insinuated that Peggy's return to Thomas time and time again proved that the allegations were baseless.
They could find absolutely no evidence that Peggy was harmed or that she was murdered.
Even after the extensive efforts by Peggy's family and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, Peggy's case remained unsolved. Do you have any thoughts on what could have happened to Peggy McGuire? Where did she disappear, leaving her son and family? There were many theories regarding Peggy's disappearance, but authorities believed that this was a homicide and that it was not a stranger who did it, but someone she knew and trusted. The investigation into Peggy's disappearance led authorities to believe that the idea of her running away was far-fetched. She had a young child she cherished, a fulfilling career, and a desire to start fresh without her ex-husband, Thomas. The notion of her running away only seems to be propagated by Thomas and his legal team. A more plausible scenario points to a domestic dispute between Peggy and Thomas that took a tragic turn. It's thought that Thomas overheard Peggy speaking with Richard and became consumed by jealousy. This may have triggered a violent outburst that led to her demise. The theory is that he used his tractor to move Peggy's body to a secluded spot for burial, hoping to keep his heinous act concealed forever. The search for answers continues, but the truth may be buried deep within the land Thomas knew so well. The search for Peggy may have ended in heartbreak, but the fight for her beloved grandson Ethan continued. In 2018, Peggy's mother took legal action, seeking visitation and custody of the young boy from Thomas, who she believed was responsible for her daughter's disappearance.
He was involved in some way?
Yes,
Why?
because I know how he was. I've heard his threats. He's broke her nose. He's done so much to her. She was dating. He didn't want another man to be around his son.
Is he a person of interest, Thomas McIntosh?
Everybody's a person of interest in this case until Peggy McGuire is found.
Despite her best efforts, Ethan was ultimately placed in foster care, leaving Peggy's mother to wonder what kind of life her grandson would have without the loving guidance of his mother. A man named Billy Taylor, who knew Peggy for just 6 months, offered a $150,000 reward for any information leading to the discovery of Peggy McGuire. However, tragedy struck again in February 2021 when 13-year-old Ethan McIntosh went missing. He was last seen driving a tractor in his Oklahoma town. The abandoned tractor heightened concerns, and a widespread search ensued. Thankfully, after an intense effort involving police and volunteers, the missing boy was eventually located. He was discovered alone, 20 miles away from where the search began. He was severely dehydrated and was found sleeping just a few miles away from his house. However, this happy ending has only served to cast a harsh light on a much darker mystery: the still unsolved disappearance of his mother, Peggy McGuire, who also disappeared 6 long years ago in the same small town. This case again opened the door into the investigation surrounding her disappearance, and now only time will tell what Ethan and her family can know about Peggy. Despite a massive search effort and an ongoing investigation, Peggy has yet to be found. The disappearance of Peggy has left her family, friends, and community in a state of grief and uncertainty.
January 6, 2001 was supposed to be a day of new beginnings for 32-year-old Pamela Shelley, as she planned to leave her home in DeWitt County, move to Arkansas, and start a new life with her 12-year-old daughter Kayla and 9-year-old son Dustin. But just 20 minutes before she was set to depart, tragedy struck. Pamela was shot in the head in the bathroom of the house she shared with her boyfriend, 41-year-old Ronnie Hendrick. What really happened on that fateful day? Why was Pam shot? And by whom? Cuero, DeWitt County, Texas, is a quaint little town in the heart of Lone Star State. With a population of just over 20,000, this tight-knit community is known for its friendly locals, rich history, and breathtaking scenery. Surrounded by sprawling ranches and vast stretches of farmland, DeWitt County is a place where time seems to stand still. The beauty of DeWitt County lies in its unspoiled natural landscapes. Rolling hills stretch as far as the eye can see, adorned with vibrant wildflowers that paint the countryside in a kaleidoscope of colors. People are always drawn to take a leisurely stroll along the serene Guadalupe River, where the gentle current invites them to dip their toes or try their hand at fishing. But this small, tight-knit community was rocked by the brutal murder of Pam Shelley in 2001, a woman who had only been living in their midst for a few short months. In the year of 1969, in the small town of Ashdown, Arkansas, a bright and caring girl named Pamela Shelley was born in a hard-working family. Her father was a lodging truck driver, while her mother worked in a nursing home. Despite the struggles of living in a small town, Pamela never lost her friendly demeanor and always went out of her way to be kind to those around her. At the tender age of 16, in 1985, Pam met her first husband, Jesse Suggs. They immediately hit it off and discussed getting married someday. However, Pam's father insisted that she finish high school first. So after graduation, Pam and Jesse tied the knot and started a family. In 1989, 2 years after their marriage, they had a daughter named Kayla, but unfortunately, their marriage was marred by Jesse's issues with drugs and crime, leading to their eventual divorce. Pamela's next marriage was in 1991 to a man named Gary, but it was short-lived, lasting only a year. She briefly reunited with Jesse before moving back in with her parents. However, fate had other plans for Pam, as she soon reconnected with her childhood friend, Ronnie Hendricks. Despite not having seen each other for over a decade, their connection was still strong, and they soon started dating. In 1992, she had a son with Ronnie named Dustin. Ronnie asked Pam and her children to move with him to Cuero, Texas, and after some consideration, Pam agreed. Pam, her son Dustin, and Ronnie made the long drive to Cuero in the summer of 2000. Ronnie's family lived in the area, including his mother, Deborah. At first, things seemed to be going well, but tensions soon arose when Pam's daughter Kayla joined them a few months later. Kayla clashed with Ronnie, often refusing to help around the house and demanding to be sent back to Arkansas to be with her father. This caused a strain on Pam and Ronnie's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. Despite the turmoil, Pam remained devoted to Ronnie and her children. She had been living with Ronnie on rural property in DeWitt County, just a mile away from Ronnie's mother and stepfather. Pam had only been in Texas for 5 months, but her life had already been turned upside down by the turmoil surrounding her and her family. Tragedy struck when Pam was shot 800 miles away from her home and family in Arkansas in January 2001. On the bitterly cold evening of January 6, 2001, at 5 p.m., Pamela Shelley, her 9-year-old son Dustin, and 12-year-old daughter Kayla, all preparing to leave the rural Texas property they shared with Pamela's boyfriend, Ronnie Hendricks. It had been a tumultuous few months for the family, with constant bickering and arguments between Kayla and Ronnie, and Pam and Ronnie also having their fair share of disagreements. Just 20 minutes before they were scheduled to leave and head back to their home state of Arkansas, tragedy struck. A single gunshot rang out, shattering the peaceful calm of the countryside. Ronnie immediately called 911 and told the DeWitt County Police that he heard the shot and didn't know what was going on. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found Pam lying on the bathroom floor with a gunshot wound to the head. Blood was everywhere, and the gun was sitting on the counter, almost as if it had been placed there deliberately. The first responders were stunned and immediately began tending to Pam. They told Ronnie that it would take at least an hour to get to the nearest hospital, but he insisted he knew a shorter backroads route and volunteered to drive the ambulance to the hospital himself. Pam was clinging to life, but was still alive when they took her away. Tragically, Pam succumbed to her injuries and passed away at the hospital. The news was grim, and now the focus turned to finding out what happened. The following day, Pam's ex-husband Jesse arrived at the hospital and took the children back to Arkansas. The story of Pam's death is one of the most gripping and harrowing stories you could ever hear. The initial investigation was marred by the misinformation provided by Ronnie's family members. They painted a picture of a deeply troubled woman with a history of mental illness and suicide attempts. This narrative was eagerly embraced by the police, who were quick to believe that Pam had taken her own life. The medical examiner's ruling only served to reinforce this narrative. The ME was given a crooked version of events from the scene of the crime. They were told that Pam was a troubled and unhappy soul with a long history of mental illness. Ronnie, her boyfriend, claimed that she had taken her own life. The medical examiner observed that the gunshot wound was a contact wound to the right temple area, traveling front to back, down to up, and right to left, a classic self-inflicted wound. The autopsy confirmed that Pam's death was indeed self-inflicted. In the aftermath of Pam's death, the people of DeWitt County were left with more questions than answers. For 7 long years, the case remained cold, the trail growing colder with each passing day. Finally, all but Carl Bowen had given up on Pamela Shelley. In 2008, Carl Bowen was a newly appointed investigator under the supervision of DeWitt County Sheriff Jody Zaveski, who was not in office during the time of the shooting in 2001. However, Carl was part of the law enforcement team at that time and had some knowledge of the case. He was troubled by the fact that Hendrick was not subjected to a polygraph test and had vanished after the incident. Carl had suspicions about the credibility of Ronnie's account for all these years, and he finally had the opportunity to address them. He discussed reopening the cold case with Sheriff Zaveski. For Carl, it was an itch he could not ignore, a nagging feeling that something was not right, that there was more to this case than meets the eye, and so he took it upon himself to seek out the truth and bring justice to a grieving family. When, in the summer of 2008, Ronnie Hendrick was arrested for a domestic abuse charge against his girlfriend and brought to DeWitt County Jail, it was an opportunity Carl could not pass up. He saw a chance to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long, to get to the bottom of what had really happened to Pam, and so he approached Ronnie, a man with a troubled past, a history of violence and addiction, and convinced him to take a polygraph test. The results were clear. Deception. Ronnie had been lying all these years, concealing the truth behind a web of lies and half-truths. But Carl did not stop there. He dug deeper, speaking to witnesses, gathering evidence, piecing together a case that would finally bring the truth to light. And what he found was damning. A pattern of abuse, a history of violence, and a man who had fled to the other side of the country, hoping to escape the consequences of his actions. But Carl was relentless, driven by a sense of duty and a need to see justice done. Ronnie Hendrick had a troubled past, with a history of alcohol abuse and domestic violence. He had been arrested several times for domestic violence, including a charge in 2008 that led to his encounter with Detective Carl Bowen, who reopened the case. Hendrick was born in Texas in 1960 and had a difficult upbringing. His father died when he was young, and he was raised by his mother, who struggled to support the family. Hendrick dropped out of high school and began working as a mechanic, but his problems with alcohol soon began to affect his job and personal life. In addition to his domestic violence charges, Hendrick had been convicted of several other crimes over the years, including drug possession and DWI. At the time of Pam Shelley's death, he was out on parole after serving time in a South Dakota prison for a DWI conviction. During the investigation into Pam's death, Hendrick initially claimed that she had committed suicide, but eventually changed his story, admitting to being in the room with her when she died, but denying that he had killed her. However, as Detective Bowen dug deeper into the case, he uncovered a significant amount of circumstantial evidence that pointed to Hendrick as the killer. In addition to the inconsistencies in Hendrick's story, Bowen spoke with witnesses who had seen Hendrick and Pam arguing in the hours before her death. He also discovered that Hendrick had left the state immediately after Pam's death, a fact that suggested he was trying to avoid being caught. After the case had been reopened, Carl Bowen reached out to the TV show Cold Justice for assistance in investigating Pam's death. Cold Justice is a true crime show that investigates cold cases and collaborates with local law enforcement agencies to help solve them. The show's hosts, former prosecutor Kelly Siegler and former crime scene investigator Yolanda McClary, teamed up with Carl Bowen and DeWitt County Sheriff's Office to take a fresh look at the case. The Cold Justice team arrived in DeWitt County in December 2012 and spent several weeks reviewing the evidence and conducting interviews. They were able to uncover new information and interview witnesses who had not been previously interviewed. The team also brought in a ballistics expert to examine the gun that was found next to Pam's body. The ballistics expert found that the gun had been fired twice, contradicting Ronnie Hendrick's claim that he had only heard one shot. The team also found discrepancies in the stories that Ronnie's family members had told the police, including an alleged suicide note that had never been found. Furthermore, the team discovered that Ronnie had a history of domestic violence and had been convicted of several crimes, including felony DWI. The Cold Justice team's findings were presented to a grand jury in May 2013, and Ronnie Hendrick was indicted for Pam's murder. He was apprehended in the picturesque state of South Dakota, where he had cunningly established a secret residence under an assumed identity, only to be forcefully transported across state lines to Texas, where the legal proceedings awaited his presence in the courtroom. After years of investigation, in 2012, the medical examiner changed the cause of Pam's death from suicide to undetermined. This was a significant development in the case because it opened the possibility that Pam's death may have been a homicide. Ronnie Hendrick was eventually indicted on murder charges in connection to Pam's death, and his trial was set for September 2013. However, a TV program called Cold Justice aired an episode about the case one day before jury selection. This caused concern among the legal team, who worried that the program's biased opinions could influence potential jurors. Consequently, the judge declared a mistrial and the trial was postponed. In October 2014, Ronnie Hendrick was found guilty of the murder of Pamela Shelley and sentenced to 75 years in prison. Despite the setback, the prosecution offered Ronnie Hendrick a plea deal of 22 years in prison, which he accepted. Despite taking the plea deal, Ronnie maintains his innocence and denies any involvement in Pam's death. Kayla, Pam's daughter, forgave Ronnie, but she still struggles to understand why he would accept the plea deal if he was innocent. The case remains a tragic and heartbreaking one, and the people who loved Pam continue to grapple with the reality of her death. The case of Pamela Shelley's death is a tragic reminder of the devastating impact of domestic abuse and the importance of seeking justice for victims. Thanks to the tireless efforts of investigators like Carl Bowen and the team from Cold Justice, the truth about what happened to Pam was finally revealed. While Ronnie Hendrick may maintain his innocence, the evidence presented at trial and his acceptance of a plea deal suggest otherwise. How do you think the tireless efforts of investigators like Carl Bowen and the Cold Justice team impacted the outcome of this case? Do you believe Ronnie Hendrick's claim of innocence holds merit, considering the evidence presented at trial and his decision to accept a plea deal? Let us know in the comments below.
And they said that they had found the lady's vehicle on a dead-end street and that they were making a house-to-house search for her. And as soon as they said house-to-house search, it was as if I heard someone speaking to me, said she's not in a house. And as soon as that thought registered, I saw exactly where she was. It was like there was a picture in front of me.
On December 17, 1980, 32-year-old Etta Smith arrived at the Lockheed Aerospace plant where she worked and readied herself for the day ahead. In the background, the radio featured the story of 31-year-old nurse Melanie Uribe, who had mysteriously vanished on her way to work. Upon hearing the story, Etta was overcome with visions of Melanie. When she arrived at the Los Angeles police station, she had no idea if she would be believed or whether they would think she was mad. Did she actually experience a psychic connection to the case? And would it help detectives in solving it? Melanie Uribe was born on September 9, 1948. Unfortunately, there is not much information available about Melanie's life. By 1980, 31-year-old Melanie was divorced and was raising her 8-year-old son alone. Melanie worked as a nurse at the Pacoima Hospital in Burbank, California, and her colleagues described her as devoted and hardworking. Melanie's kind nature meant she was beloved by all who knew her, and she worked hard to give her son a better life. She was also noted as extremely punctual and would never miss a shift without calling in first. On December 15, 1980, doctors at Pacoima Hospital watched as the clock ticked away. They stood in the ward corridors, glancing up and down, looking for any sign of Melanie. After failing to find her in the wards, they checked the clocking in records for that morning and found that Melanie had never arrived at work. Sensing that something wasn't right, one of her colleagues picked up the phone and dialed Melanie's home, but there was no answer. As the doctor heard the droning dial tone reverberating in his ear, he felt a knot in his stomach. Shortly after the failed call to Melanie's home, the Pacoima Hospital contacted the Los Angeles Police Department, triggering a missing person investigation. The Los Angeles Police Department arrived at Melanie's home and found it eerily quiet. There is no mention of where her son was at the time of her disappearance, and we can only hope he was safe. Investigators searched high and low in Melanie's home but found no clues. They spoke to neighbors and Melanie's family and discovered that the last time she had been seen was on the morning of December 15, 1980. Neighbors recalled seeing Melanie entering her van and heading off to work. So where was she now? The LAPD released details of Melanie's disappearance to the local news. Every channel and station broadcasted this news, and the city of Burbank watched on in horror. California was no stranger to serial killers, and many residents feared they might be next. Doors and windows were locked, weapons were purchased, and the mood in the city was tense. On December 16th, the day after Melanie disappeared, investigators made a shocking discovery. Their search had taken them to Lopez Canyon in the San Gabriel Mountains. Here, the Los Angeles Police Department stumbled across Melanie's burnt-out pickup truck. Her nurse's uniform was inside, but there was no sign of Melanie. Panic and pressure were mounting on the LAPD, and they were in a race against time to find Melanie alive. When news of Melanie's disappearance hit the headlines, tips and leads began pouring in. Most of them were not valuable and were cases of mistaken identity or jumbled memories. Others were much more useful, and much more sinister. Several anonymous witnesses called the LAPD and reported that on December 15th near Lopez Canyon, they heard a woman screaming. As they focused their eyes on the source of the sound, they saw two men forcing their way into a woman's car. The two men overpowered the women, and after gaining entry, they drove away.
And one of them jumped her on the driver's side, and the other one comes running around on the other side, and she was screaming.
With these new leads in mind, investigators began to speculate that Melanie had either been kidnapped or had been the victim of a carjacking gone terribly wrong. Melanie's friends and family told the LAPD that she had no known enemies and was a sweet and gentle woman who was loved by all. The LAPD also had to consider whether Melanie's ex-husband, whose name was not released to the public, was somehow involved in her disappearance. When a woman goes missing, it is commonly seen that the husband or partner is responsible for her disappearance or death. No information indicates that Melanie's husband was ever considered a suspect. Whilst the LAPD were hard at work trying to track Melanie down, another unusual source began their own investigation. On December 17, 1980, 32-year-old Etta Smith awoke as usual. She donned her uniform and went to the Lockheed Aerospace plant where she worked as a shipping clerk. While Etta was working away at her desk, a news story came on the radio. Everyone's ears pricked up when they heard that a 31-year-old nurse named Melanie Uribe had mysteriously disappeared on her way to work just 2 days earlier. Those in the office let out small gasps of shock and discussed the case with each other. How could a woman just disappear, and what had happened to her? Whilst her colleagues were chatting, Etta was overcome with intense visions of Melanie. She first saw that Melanie wasn't in a house. The visions grew stronger and stronger, and she said it was almost as if someone was trying to talk to her.
And as soon as they said house-to-house search, it was as if I heard someone speaking to me, said she's not in a house. And as soon as that thought registered, I saw exactly where she was. It was like there was a picture in front of me.
After establishing that she wasn't in a house, Etta's visions took her down a canyon and a winding road. The sides of the road were littered with shrubbery and trees, and sprawling hills could be seen in the background. During this vision, something just off a dirt road caught Etta's eye. It was something white, starkly contrasting with the greenery surrounding it. It looked like a uniform, but Etta wasn't sure. The vision played out like a movie for Etta. Once the vision was over, Etta was left stunned. She had never experienced psychic abilities before and didn't know what was happening. Inside, a moral dilemma was raised. She knew that the police would not believe her and think she was a madwoman, but for the sake of Melanie, she knew she had to tell someone what she saw. Etta remained at her desk for a few moments, pondering her choices. Just minutes after she had been hit with the bizarre vision, Etta excused herself from work and headed to the LAPD's Foothill Division.
When I get to a certain point, if I turn right, I'm going home. If I turn left, I'm almost immediately in front of the police station. The argument I'm having with myself is, should I tell them or should I not?
Those who worked with Etta were confused by the entire event. She had never expressed any inklings of psychic abilities before, and now she had had a vision of a missing woman. Was Etta experiencing some sort of mental break, or was she right? When she arrived at the LAPD, she was not greeted with open arms. LAPD officer Lee Ryan took Etta's report and was skeptical about her vision. When Detective Ryan saw that Etta worked for Lockheed Martin, a very reputable company, he felt more at ease and like he could trust her. During the meeting, Etta described the scene in vivid detail and even pointed to Lopez Canyon on a map. She told officers that she had seen something white in the distance off a dirt road and feared that it was Melanie's nurse uniform. We do not know whether the LAPD had released details about Melanie's car being discovered in Lopez Canyon the day before. Either way, this information only made Etta's claims more credible. She told Detective Ryan that they needed to check this area, stressing the urgency of the situation. She told officers that she had not had any visions before or after this event. Detective Ryan and his fellow officers listened closely to Etta's story and assured her they would check the area.
I have to tell you, this missing lady, I could see where she was. Can you show me this on a map? And I said, sure.
Etta left the police station that evening with a renewed sense of urgency. She felt that the LAPD hadn't taken her seriously and was concerned that they would delay searching Lopez Canyon. Her mind swirled with possibilities and scenarios as she drove to collect her kids. She was torn. Should she wait for the LAPD to do their job, or should she get involved? Something compelled Etta to make a decision that would change the course of her life. According to reports, Etta was already late collecting her children that afternoon. When Etta finally showed up, they expected to be taken home, but Etta had other ideas. She collected her 20-year-old niece, and along with her 2 children, the 4 of them drove out to the exact spot where Etta had seen Melanie in Lopez Canyon. As Etta's car slowly rolled to the Lopez Canyon entrance, something inside her changed. She felt as though she was being directed by a force bigger than herself. She noticed tire tracks on the road and slowly crept alongside them so as not to destroy any evidence. Etta's children had their faces pressed up to each window and played the lookout role. After a few minutes of driving, Etta decided to get out of the car and follow the tracks on foot. She later told Unsolved Mysteries that when she put her hand in the dirt, it felt electrifying and that she could feel the trauma of Melanie. The group veered off down a small dirt road, the same dirt road that Etta had seen in her visions. Just as the group were beginning to think that all hope was lost, one of Etta's children motioned her over. In the distance, amongst the grass and bushes, was a white nursing shoe. A wave of emotions washed over Etta again, and she instinctively knew it was Melanie. She ordered her children to get back in the car. The group drove from Lopez Canyon to the closest phone, where Etta dialed 911 and asked for Detective Lee Ryan of the LAPD. A sea of squad cars arrived over the horizon, and Etta followed close behind. She knew in her heart of hearts that the body she had just discovered was that of Melanie Uribe, but she needed to see for herself. Melanie's body was found discarded in a bush in Lopez Canyon above Lakeview Terrace. When her body was discovered, she was found naked with just her nursing shoes on. It was clear to officers at the scene that she had suffered extensive injuries, but the severity of these injuries would not be released until the coroner conducted their report. Melanie's family were notified of her death, and they arrived at the medical examiner's office demanding answers. In their report, the coroner noted that Melanie had been assaulted before being beaten to death and her body dumped in a bush. The brutality of the crime shocked Burbank. Melanie was a sweet and kind woman who worked as a nurse. Who would want to hurt someone who does so much good for others and the community? The LAPD reevaluated Etta's story and wondered how she knew so much about Melanie's disappearance and where to find her. It appears that they did not release the location of Melanie's van to the public in the early days of the investigation, so how did Etta know the exact place to find Melanie's body? Etta quickly became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. Many LAPD officers didn't believe in psychics or psychic abilities and dismissed Etta as a madwoman.
I don't think they're believing me. I kept telling them the same thing.
Shortly before the questioning began, Etta was arrested for her potential involvement in Melanie's murder. She was questioned by LAPD officers for 10 hours straight. They tried to pressure her into confessing and did their best to try and break her down. One source even reported that they held her in a cell for 24 hours without food or water. Etta agreed to take 2 polygraphs to prove her innocence, and she passed both with flying colors. At first, officers accused Etta of cheating on the test by controlling her breath and nerves. Etta told Unsolved Mysteries that the officers then lied about the results, telling her she failed.
They said, "You failed."
This was an attempt to coax a confession out of her. But Etta refused to confess to a murder she did not commit. As Etta wasn't cracking, the LAPD charged her with being an accessory to murder and threw her into a prison cell. For 4 days, Etta stared at the iron bars before her, wondering if she would ever be free. What Etta didn't know was that on the outside, the LAPD had made significant headway in Melanie's case. Etta was purposefully kept in the dark as some officers secretly hoped that she would snap and tell them what they wanted to hear.
Not a letter, not a phone call, nothing. They treated me like so much dirt that you kick out the door and the wind blows away.
Thankfully for Etta and her family, a vital clue would be called in just days after Melanie's murder. In late December 1980, the LAPD received a call from a secret informant. In this call, the informant told them that he heard 21-year-old Spencer Nelson, 20-year-old Luis Carnell, and a 17-year-old boy whose name wasn't released due to his age, bragging about the murder of Melanie Uribe. This news traveled fast around the neighborhood, and soon most of Burbank had heard the rumors. One of the trio had openly bragged to someone in his neighborhood that he and his friends were quite literally getting away with murder. The group were smug, but that smirk was about to be wiped from their faces. Days after the informant called, the LAPD moved in and arrested the 17-year-old boy, Spencer Nelson, and Luis Carnell Morgan. During questioning, one of the men cracked under pressure and turned the other two in. He told the LAPD everything they needed to know about that chilly December morning. Upon hearing that their friend had ratted them out, the other two quickly followed suit and admitted to killing Melanie Uribe. According to the three men, they spotted Melanie that morning and decided to jump into her truck while she was stopped at traffic lights. The three quickly overpowered Melanie and took control of the truck. From here, they drove to Lopez Canyon, around 15 miles from Melanie's home, where they found a secluded spot on a dirt road. Here, the three men sexually assaulted, beat, and robbed Melanie, all while she begged for her life. The trio also admitted that the crushing blow was a large rock to Melanie's head. They showed no mercy while she begged on her knees. Once she was dead, they threw away her clothing and threw her into some bushes. They also decided to burn Melanie's truck to destroy evidence, and all it did was allow the police to focus their efforts on a particular location. All three men were charged and convicted of Melanie's murder and were sentenced to prison. No information is available about the trial or the sentences handed down. Shortly after the three men confessed to Melanie's murder, Etta was set free and exonerated.
All of a sudden, somebody appeared at my cell door, unlocked it, and said, "Come on, you're free to go." I didn't know why, didn't care why. I just wanted out of there.
She didn't let her experience hold her back and immediately sought further legal action against the LAPD. In 1987, Etta's trial against the LAPD would finally end. As the Los Angeles Times reported, Etta had been fighting this case for almost 6.5 years when a verdict was reached. Etta was forced to revisit traumatic experiences and explain her strange psychic visions to the court. The courts agreed that Etta had been wrongfully arrested during the investigation into Melanie Uribe's murder. Her defense attorney stated that finding a body isn't a crime, neither is having a vision. Etta Smith asked the courts for $750,000 in damages for the trauma she was put through. She also stated that her personal and professional reputations had taken a hit, and that the purpose of this trial was also to clear her name and prove that she was not involved in the murder of Melanie Uribe. In 1987, Etta Smith was awarded $24,000 in damages. Etta now uses her psychic abilities to help other police departments solve cases. In the summer of 1952, 10-year-old Constance Christine Connie Smith from Sundance, Wyoming, was eager to go away to Camp Sloan in Salisbury, Connecticut. She was going away on her own for the first time, and in the days leading up to the camp, she was unable to stop talking about it. At the camp, too, she appeared to be having a fun time, so it was rather strange that on July 16, 1952, she abruptly left the camp on her own and vanished without a trace. What had happened to Connie Smith? How could no one have known where she went? This case begins in Wyoming. On July 11, 1942, Constance Christine Connie Smith was born. She was the youngest daughter of Peter Franklin Smith and Helen Jensen. The couple also had another child, Nels Jensen Smith, who was 3 years older than Connie. Peter Franklin Smith, Connie's father, was the son of Wyoming's former governor. Helen Jensen, her mother, was also from a well-brought family, so Connie and her brother Nels were not neglected. However, Connie's parents weren't happy with each other. As time passed, things between them turned sour, and they finally divorced in 1949. Connie was just 7 years old at the time. But even during the divorce, Connie, her mother, and brother continued to stay at Ranch A in Sundance, which belonged to her father. Her father, Peter Franklin Smith, later remarried and went on to have 2 more daughters. But despite Peter's remarriage, it did not affect his relationship with Connie, as he would often visit her from time to time. In the summer of 1952, Helen decided to meet her family in Greenwich, and she took Connie along with her. On reaching Greenwich, Helen met her parents, Carl and Esther Jensen, and her sister, Ruth Jensen McWilliams. During a family get-together, Helen, Connie's mother, decided that it would be better for her daughter to go to a summer camp to avoid boredom and have some fun. So she signed Connie up for a camp program at Camp Sloan, which was then managed by the YMCA of Westchester County, New York. In those days, Camp Sloan was a well-known place. Although it was founded in 1928, it has kept its name over time. Now, the camp is located in the Connecticut town of Lakeville. To get there, you needed to go inside a forest. However, the place had a number of camping-friendly natural routes. It was also close to some hills, which were visible from the campsite. The camp's creators placed a strong focus on the values of its campers from the beginning, saying they only recruited the best and most qualified personnel. This was what initially drew Helen's attention to the camp when she heard about the program. Connie left for the camp in July, although the precise date is unknown. Despite this, we do know that she was quite eager to attend the camp. She was a kind girl who got along with both children and adults. She also cherished animals, particularly horses. When she arrived at the camp, she appeared to be really enthusiastic. The reason being that she was thrilled with the various activities that were scheduled for the camp, as they included a horse show and square dance. On July 13th, Connie was visited by her mother and her maternal grandparents. When she met them, she told them about the camp's planned activities that were supposed to take place in the last week of July. Connie loved horses, and since there was a horse show planned in the camp's events, she asked her mother for permission to stay at the camp until the end of the month. However, her mother did not agree to Connie's request. She insisted that Connie was going to return to Wyoming by the end of July. This disheartened Connie, but instead of reacting, she bit her tongue and agreed to her mother's decision. On July 16, 1952, early in the morning, Connie got into a brawl with a number of other female campers. Although the exact reason for the argument is unknown, it is known that Connie had been bullied for her appearance since she was more mature than a typical 10-year-old. The fight caused her to get a bloody nose. Back in her tent after the fight, she reached for an ice pack that she had gotten from the camp infirmary the night before. Apparently, the previous night, Connie had injured her hip when tumbling out of her tent. Connie saw that the ice pack had melted, so she decided to go to the infirmary to get more ice. She informed her tent mates that she would be skipping breakfast because she needed to return the ice pack and then get ready for the day's activities. She then changed into a vivid red jacket and blue shorts before making her way to the camp's infirmary. Little did she know that she would never return. Connie had now been gone for several hours. It was only during the afternoon hours that Carol Baker, Connie's group leader, noticed Connie wasn't around. Concerned by this, she went to report it to the camp director, Ernest P. Roberts. This was then brought to the attention of the camp counselors. They immediately went to check her tent. However, when they got there, they found the dispensary ice pack still inside. Connie was nowhere to be seen. However, her clothes and other belongings were still inside the tent. Worried about what might have happened to her, they conducted an extensive search throughout the campsite. However, it did not turn up any clues as to her whereabouts. Without any hope, the camp director then approached the police to handle the matter. When the police took up the case, they were determined to find Connie. They immediately began laying down tracks for where Connie could have been seen before she vanished, despite having very little knowledge of her behavior. A camp counselor recalled seeing Connie walking towards the Indian Mountain Road. However, what was surprising was that the counselor never detained Connie or even asked her a question. As the case progressed, the news about Connie's disappearance brought forward many witnesses. Some of them came forward and reported seeing her picking daisies nearby. Another private homeowner who stayed on Indian Mountain Road claimed that a young girl who resembled Connie's description knocked on her door and asked how to get to Lakeville, Connecticut. She also added that the girl had tears in her eyes. And later that day, a husband and wife whose identities were not disclosed saw her attempting to hitchhike near the intersection of US Route 44 and Belgo Road. After that, the trail to where Connie could have gone went cold. There was no further information after they got to Route 44 near Belgo Road. It was then that the police decided that the disappearance of Connie Smith wasn't just a lost child case. It was something more. On an immediate alert, the barracks across the country were alerted to the matter. In a matter of time, several detectives rushed in, bloodhounds were put on the trail, and airplanes from the Connecticut wing of the Civil Air Patrol and Air Force planes from Westover Field, Massachusetts, were flying overhead. Even jeeps were used to search through the woody terrain. However, despite such massive search efforts, Connie was nowhere to be found. When in Wyoming, Connie would often camp alone. She was also taught to walk off trail and lay signs to find her way back. However, it seemed as though she never found her way back to the camp when she left it. The police notified Connie's parents, Helen and Peter, of their daughter's disappearance. Shocked to hear the news, Helen drove as fast as she could from Greenwich. Her father took a flight from Wyoming to Lakeville. On reaching the place, they were first sent in for questioning. The police wanted to rule out every possibility, since the couple was divorced, so it was highly likely that one of them wanted to take custody of the child. During the questioning, they asked if either parent had kidnapped her to take her from the other. The response stated that such a thought had never even occurred to either parent. On hearing their statements, the police then concluded that Connie's disappearance was a kidnapping. However, in the days that followed, no ransom arrived. On top of that, no one in Lakeville saw Connie. She never took a bus or a taxi or visited any of the stores. In the months that followed, the police never failed to search for Connie. More than 11,000 circulars were printed and tacked up in service stations, post offices, restaurants, schools, and fish and game departments around the country. According to an article by the Register Citizen, truck drivers, traveling carnival workers, and gypsies from Arkansas who camped along Route 22 were questioned about Connie's disappearance. Every time a lead was found, her father would also participate in investigating it. Apparently, investigators also took to hiding in the forest for several days to see if Connie was being held against her will. However, nothing came of it. Where could have Connie gone? As the days turned into weeks and then months, the probability of solving this case seemed to decrease with every passing second. In 1951, a year before Connie vanished, William Henry Redmond, a former carnival employee, strangled Jane Marie Althoff, an 8-year-old Pennsylvania girl. Redmond was said to have been in the Lakeville area on the day Connie vanished. Leo Turcotte, a former state trooper from Connecticut, clarified this information. 3 years after Connie vanished, in 1955, Leo recalled receiving an anonymous phone tip from a man in Montreal who claimed to have worked for a carnival in the Lakeville area and to have knowledge of the girl's disappearance. However, it was discovered to be a hoax when the police looked into the situation. Redmond was taken into custody for the 1951 slaying of the girl. He was given the maximum sentence. Then 66 years old, Redmond admitted to a fellow prisoner that he had killed 4 people in his lifetime while serving this sentence in 1988. He did, however, pass a polygraph examination in the case of Connie's disappearance. Redmond later passed away in prison in 1992. In April 1953, according to the police's case report, which was confirmed by Detective Downs, who was assigned the Connie Smith case, he received a tip and a confession from a traveling jewelry salesman, Frederick Pope. He told them that he knew where Connie Smith was. Pope alleged that he and an associate, Jack Walker, picked Connie up on Route 44, promising her a ride back to Wyoming. Pope claimed that Walker killed Connie in Arizona and that Pope himself later beat Walker to death with a tire iron. This all seemed like gold dust to the detectives in the Connie Smith case. Upon deeper examination, however, the story fell apart, as no records of Jack Walker existed. Pope later admitted the story was a hoax and was dismissed as a suspect. In later years, there were more leads and suspects in connection with Connie's disappearance. One of these was a man named George Davies, who in 1957 was doing time and awaiting execution for the brutal murder of two girls named Gatane Boivin and Brenda Doucette in Connecticut. While languishing in prison, he came forward to admit that he had also killed Connie Smith and had buried her body on the bank of the Naugatuck River. However, police could not find the body. Later, they realized that Davies was actually giving false information. When the police confronted Davies, he revealed that he had made up the whole story about Connie Smith. Another suspect that was looked into was August Epp. He was the camp's caretaker and gatekeeper at the time, but also had a criminal record. On the day that Connie disappeared, he claimed to have seen Connie picking daisies as she walked. When asked by police officers as to why he didn't stop her, he answered by saying that he thought that Connie wasn't a camper. Since she was physically more mature than a typical 10-year-old girl, Connie's appearance from afar misled him. But owing to his criminal history, August was interrogated regarding the matter. However, since the police saw no evidence that could link August to Connie's disappearance, he was eventually ruled out as a suspect. The disappearance of Connie Smith was always on the family's mind, and Peter Smith, Connie's father, even consulted psychics at one point. One source states that Peter went to a woman named Lady Wonder, who was known for her psychic abilities. Around that time, she had allegedly used her psychic abilities to solve the case of a missing 4-year-old boy named Danny Matson in Quincy, Massachusetts, which led to her fame. On hearing what Lady Wonder could do, Peter Franklin Smith, Connie's father, sought out her services. However, when Lady Wonder tried to use her psychic abilities, she saw no sign of Connie in her visions. Astonishingly, Lady Wonder later ended up admitting that she had made up all the information regarding the missing boy's case, which had led to her fame. It turns out it was just a fluke that she had been able to solve the case. However, with regard to Connie Smith's disappearance, she revealed that she knew nothing about it. This left Peter feeling disheartened and led the case to another dead end. As the years followed, the investigation into the case of the disappearance of Connie Smith did have some leads. One such lead was in 1958 when the police managed to dig up the skeletal remains of a girl at a place called Skinner Ridge in the Grand Canyon National Park. The body found was decaying, unclothed, and lying prone. Investigators stated that the body could have been there for possibly over a year. There were also other things found beside the body, like clothing, a comb, and a nail file case. Could these be the remains of Connie? The investigators could not determine that since the face and other physical markers that could identify the girl were all decayed. Hence, the body of the girl was labeled as Little Miss X. When Connie's family found out about the news of Little Miss X, this caught their attention and it set off a full-fledged investigation. However, after 4 years in 1962, it was found that the skeletal remains did not actually belong to Connie Smith. The evidence examined by a Colorado dental surgeon, Dr. David Berman, and a pathologist, Dr. George I. Ogura, made it clear that the bones did not belong to her, the Associated Press reports. Though dental findings stated that the 3 fillings of the same technique and material used by the family's dentist at the time were found, the possibility that it could be Connie was ruled out. The hunt for Connie also led her mother Helen to post 2 rewards. One reward was staked for her return, and the other for her whereabouts. However, despite offering a handsome reward, no one came forward with any information. These dead ends to the case brought despair to both Connie's family and the police investigators. However, despite failed efforts, the police did have a few suspects in relation to the disappearance of Connie Smith. A few years later, in 2002, an article brought forth a new lead that the police were to investigate. Carol Andrews, who was once known as Carol Baker, came forward in relation to the case. She was also the former leader of the group that Connie was in. When the police approached her and asked for a statement on the matter, she revealed that she had met two intimidating men during her stay at the camp. While sharing her story, she recalled that at the camp, while she and her sister were playing together, two men had come up and tried to talk to them. However, on seeing them, Carol and her sister went into hiding since they both looked sinister and frightening. As the two men left, they then got in a car that had a license plate reading QF5876. This was a New York plate. The two men who had appeared were apparently thugs who had stolen this vehicle. However, when police tried to look further into who they were, nothing could be found. Connie's family was very traumatized by the experience. Her brother, Nels Smith, never really recovered from the disappearance of his sister. At the age of 13, he had to deal with a great deal of trauma. His sister's disappearance made him question a lot of things. On the other hand, Connie's father never gave up on finding his daughter. Even though he remarried, he never stopped looking for Connie. But with no leads, the probability of Connie's case never getting solved seems high. Sadly, on February 22, 2012, Peter Franklin Smith, Connie's father, passed away, never getting to know what happened to his daughter. Helen Jensen, Connie's mother, on the other hand, never remarried. She too never gave up on finding her daughter. However, at the age of 47, she suffered a cardiac arrest. Sources stated that she was very disheartened and depressed after her daughter's disappearance. Nels Smith, Connie's brother, took up the case to find out what might have happened to his sister after their father passed away in 2012. Nels was articulate and sharp-minded, and he took up his father's mantle with great determination and grit. In 1954, when he had heard about the discovery of the little girl's skeletal remains, he had a more optimistic view. Though the remains were found in the Grand Canyon, which was 2,700 miles away from Lakeville, Nels did want to store the evidence and have that DNA collected. However, his mother dismissed the idea of going further with the investigation of the remains. Other sources that have suggested the case of Connie Smith's disappearance suggest that Connie was likely the victim of foul play. At the time, crimes like that were often seen a lot, especially in the age demographic of 10 to 13-year-old girls. Though the case is very sad and disturbing, if a similar case were to occur in today's age, it would eventually get solved. However, Connie's disappearance happened during a time when technology couldn't offer much help. Michael Dooling, author of Clueless in New England, The Unsolved Disappearances of Paula Weldon, Connie Smith, and Catherine Hull, published in 2010, said, "Connie's disappearance, and the others I wrote about, strikes fear in our hearts." Dooling, who is also an antiquarian and a news librarian for the Waterbury Republican American newspaper, added, "How can such a nice, normal 10-year-old girl be seen by so many people on her way to the center of Lakeville and then disappear so completely?" Though we don't know what really happened to Connie Smith, here are a few conclusions that investigators made. The first was that Connie may have been the victim of a hit-and-run case. And secondly, she could have actually gotten in a car when she was asking for a lift on Route 44. Investigators believed that she had been homesick after her mother visited her on July 13, 1952. However, the case is just so disturbing. How could she disappear with so many other people around, simply vanishing off the face of the earth? Did she run away? Was it foul play, or something entirely different? It is frustrating to know that decades later there are still many questions that remain unanswered and that her ultimate fate is still unknown. We only have the knowledge that she left the camp and was never seen again, leaving us to only wonder and speculate. I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. What do you think happened to Connie? On November 29, 1992, 35-year-old Judy Blake Moylan went to walk her dogs in the woods behind her childhood home in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and never came back. After a few hours, Judy's mother and a neighbor found her shot to death along one of the trails inside the dense woods. It was the last day of the deer hunting season that year in an area that was frequented by hunters, so Judy's death was considered a tragic accident. But was it really an accident? Or was there something much more sinister hidden in this death? It was October 16, 1957, when Judy Diane Blake was born in a conservative family in Hancock, Michigan. Judy had always been adored as the only daughter of her parents, Dale and Mary Ann Blake. Her two brothers, Jerry and David, also doted on her. Aside from being active members of the Redeemer Free Lutheran Church, Judy's parents operated a business called Dale's Service, which helped them provide their children with a quality life. In a home full of love, Judy soon grew up to be a beautiful young woman looking forward to having her own family. Judy met the love of her life, Bruce Moylan, in 1974. Both of them were working in healthcare, with Judy taking up a nursing job and Bruce working as support staff. Bruce was 3 years older than Judy and was the polar opposite of her. While Judy was shy and sweet, Bruce, on the other hand, was outgoing and confident. Unlike Judy's tight-knit and religious family, Bruce did not have a close relationship with his family. Despite the obvious differences, the two hit it off. While Judy admired his confidence, Bruce saw her as the perfect girl to settle down with. However, Judy's family was not as sure about Bruce as she was. Despite this, Judy and Bruce got married in 1978. In the years that followed, Judy's family would leave no stone unturned in trying to make him a part of their family, and it seemed like Bruce also got along with them very well. The family welcomed a new member when Judy gave birth to her only daughter Elise in 1989. For the next few years, they shared a happy life together, but they had no clue all of that was about to change forever. It was November 29, 1992, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and Judy and Bruce were visiting the Blakes along with little Elise. It was also the last day of the hunting season of that year in the Upper Peninsula area. So that Sunday morning, Bruce, along with Judy's brothers, headed out to the nearby woods to track deer, while Judy stayed behind with her mother and daughter. Sometime in the afternoon, Judy took a group of her own Springer Spaniels and her parents' dog Streak for a walk in the woods behind the property that the Blakes owned on Highway 38 in Ontonagon County, Michigan. Bidding her goodbye, Mary Ann did not realize that this was the last time she would ever see her daughter. When 2.5 hours passed with no sign of Judy, Mary Ann began to grow worried for her daughter's well-being. Although Judy was familiar with the woods, there was a possibility that she met with an accident or got into some trouble, especially considering that it was still hunting season. Taking a neighbor with her, Mary Ann went down into the woods looking for her daughter. The two women were trying to retrace Judy's steps along the walking path, which was becoming harder and harder to do as it was rapidly getting dark. After almost an hour, Mary Ann came across a grisly scene that no mother should ever have to witness. Along one of the trails, around 500 to 600 feet into the woods, Mary Ann and the neighbor found Judy, who was lying motionless on her side. Nearby, Judy's dogs were wandering around by themselves. As they turned her onto her back, they saw a bloody chest wound. It was obvious that Judy was already gone. Screaming her lungs out, Mary Ann ran back to the house and reported the unfortunate incident to the local authorities. Investigators soon discovered that it was a gunshot wound that killed Judy. Though the night was getting colder by the hour, cops were out in the woods searching for evidence with nothing but flashlights in their hands. But even after combing through the entire area, detectives did not find many clues. The bullet that killed Judy could not be found either. However, they did come across one significant clue: a blaze mark on a maple tree. Bob Ball, the lead detective assigned to the case, determined that the blaze mark could be made by the same bullet that had killed Judy. He believed that if he could find the bullet, he could retrace it back to the shooter, which would help them to understand how Judy was shot. Forensic tests of these scrapings would later show that the mark had indeed been caused by a bullet strike. Based on the body's location and the blaze mark, investigators also came to the conclusion that the bullet had hit Judy first, traveled through her heart, exited the body through her left side, hit the tree, and finally landed somewhere in the woods. At the time, the incident was considered a tragic accident. Investigators believed that an unknown hunter's errant bullet killed Judy, which was not unusual in that area of the Upper Peninsula. In fact, there had been a couple of deer hunting incidents in that area prior to this. But unfortunately, it was a very difficult task to locate the person responsible for Judy's untimely demise, considering the fact that bullets from the high-powered rifles that are used for hunting can often travel up to 3 miles or more. Most of the time, hunters do not even realize that their bullets have killed a person. Despite the assumption, Detective Ball wanted to keep an open mind. While Judy's body was taken to the medical examiner's office, detectives shifted their attention to interviewing the family members. While everyone seemed gravely upset by the tragedy, one unusual comment left Detective Ball uneasy. And it came from Bruce, who was being critical of his deceased wife for not being more careful and not wearing orange inside the woods. Bruce came under the radar of suspicion anyways, since most of the time in the case of a brutal crime, suspicion goes to the person closest to the victim. But at the same time, he knew that it could very much have just been a mourning husband who didn't know how to express his grief. Additionally, Judy's family insisted that Bruce was with them during the whole day. They were absolutely sure that Bruce had nothing to do with their daughter's death. In fact, they were even unhappy with the police for eyeing him as a suspect. It was just the beginning of the twists and turns in this mind-boggling case. It was 2 days later that the autopsy report revealed a crucial detail of the estimated time of death being around 3 p.m. As Detective Ball went back to re-interview the Blake family with the new information, they revealed that although Bruce was with them for most of the day, they did not have an eye on him around that particular time. But that did not raise any alarm bells for the Blake family. They wholeheartedly believed in his innocence, and they were really vocal about their opinion. In fact, they were not happy with the investigation, since they believed police had targeted the wrong man, who was still mourning his wife's loss. Though it was unknown to Judy's family at the time, the detectives had another reason to believe that Judy's death was no accident. Based on the trajectory of the bullet and forensic evidence, it was determined that the bullet passed through the body at an upward angle, since the entrance wound was 1 inch lower than the exit wound. This finding was crucial to the case because if a hunter had fired the shot, the bullet would have gone in a downward angle through the body, as it would have been coming from a much further distance. It was almost certain now that Judy had been killed intentionally. But was it really Bruce? Or was he just becoming a victim of the detective's tunnel vision? Based on this new finding and with his alibi in question, detectives wanted a closer look at Bruce Moylan. On December 11, 1992, just 12 days into the investigation, Bruce was invited to the sheriff's office for a formal interview. After just a few minutes in the interview with Bob Ball, Bruce had given him a detailed account of his whereabouts on the day of his wife's death, including naming almost 30 different people who had seen him that day. However, among his meticulous timeline of the day, there was a gap, a missing 30 minutes that he couldn't account for. Although he kept saying that he had nothing to do with his wife's death, Detective Ball became suspicious about him. This interview led him to wonder whether it was deer in his sight that afternoon, or he was aiming for something else. While the question of his innocence was still hanging there, Bruce's behavior kept indicating otherwise. Not only did he not observe much of a mourning period, but within a couple of weeks of Judy's death, he was also wandering around on ski trips, hanging out with friends, and even hitting on some of Judy's friends, instead of taking care of his daughter. By this time, even Judy's family had become suspicious of him despite their initial support. Needless to say, his behavior was to blame for this. Detectives were also diligently working on the case, but they were not able to find any hard proof against him. In an attempt to obtain something, Detective Ball requested a few of Bruce's friends and co-workers to secretly keep tabs on him and report back to the police if they found anything suspicious. This was how they came across a bombshell discovery. One of the calls Detective Ball made included 35-year-old Gail Lampinen, who was a co-worker of Bruce. And she had quite the story to tell the detectives about Bruce. Shortly after the funeral, Bruce showed up at Gail's house uninvited. He had 5 boxes with him filled with his dead wife's belongings. After dropping the boxes on Gail's porch, Bruce walked off before Gail could question him further. Since it was holiday time, Gail left the boxes outside for a while and paid no attention to them. When she finally opened the boxes, she noticed that the boxes were mostly filled with Judy's clothes. But in one of those boxes, beneath the clothing, Gail found a letter dated 6 months earlier and signed by Judy. Finding the letter was very unusual for Gail since she had met Judy only once. But what was even stranger was what the letter contained. It started saying that Judy wanted Gail to have her old clothes as keepsake gifts, as she believed that Gail was the only person Bruce trusted. It would then go on to say many intimate details about the marriage of Bruce and Judy and how the pair did not see things the same anymore and were on the verge of separating. It even said that Bruce needed a new girlfriend. But the oddest of them all, the writer ended the letter by noting that Bruce was incredible in the sack. The letter immediately gave Gail the impression of something not being right. Needless to say, the detectives felt the same. To check the authenticity of the letter, detectives took it to a forensic document examiner, James Stegel, who was tasked with comparing the letter with Judy's known handwriting sample to determine if the letter was indeed written by Judy. Handwriting analysis suggested that the writing in the letter was slow and deliberate, possibly indicating a forgery. Judy was ruled out as the writer of the letter, but the writing could not be conclusively linked to Bruce either. Failing to gain any solid evidence against Bruce, detectives were forced to work with the limited resources they had. In an attempt to gather more information, Detective Ball decided to approach Gail once again. In further interviews, Gail revealed to the investigators that Bruce had been vying for her attention for a long time, even before Judy's death. But Gail, who was happily married to her husband, only considered him very irritating and persistent. While Bruce kept hitting on her, she just kept ignoring him and hoped that someday he'd go away. But Gail was not the only one who disliked him. No one had anything good to say about Bruce. He spent his time flirting with other female employees at his workplace, and almost everybody tried to avoid him. His co-workers often complained that he was difficult to work with. Gail also revealed that after his wife's death, he bragged about his soon-to-be fortune. In Gail's eyes, it was nothing but his clumsy attempt to seduce her into having a relationship with him. This information was enough for Detective Ball to dig deeper into Moylan marriage. They expected that the couple would have had regular arguments, considering Bruce's flirtation at his workplace. Yet they found no evidence that Judy had any knowledge of Bruce's inappropriate behavior toward his female co-workers. However, detectives also learned about the Moylans' financial problems in the months prior to Judy's death, which were all caused by Bruce. Due to his irresponsible nature and overspending, Bruce had become heavily indebted. The situation deteriorated so much that he had no option left but to borrow money from one source to pay off another. During the entire span of their marriage, Judy had always coped well with the financial troubles thanks to her own earnings. But she had finally begun to get fed up with Bruce at this point, especially with the added responsibility of their daughter. Detectives also discovered that weeks prior to Judy's death, Bruce began stockpiling insurance policies in Judy's name. Several of those policies had a double indemnity clause, which meant that if Judy died an accidental death, the policy would pay twice as much. Detective Ball wondered whether Bruce saw this as an opportunity to get rid of his financial troubles as well as his wife. And indeed, after Judy's death, Bruce was on the verge of obtaining a financial payout worth $330,000 from Judy's life insurance policies. But what investigators learned next sent a chill down their spine. It turned out that in 1991, nearly 14 months before Judy's death, she had met with a tragic accident. An 85-pound chimney block accidentally slid off a roof where Bruce was working, hitting Judy's head and almost killing her. Luckily, she had survived the attack with only a severe concussion and a few days in the hospital. In a shocking turn of events, shortly after this incident, a fire broke out in the Moylan house when Judy was sleeping alone inside the home. Once again, with a stroke of luck, Judy would survive this danger by waking up in time and calling the fire department. Judy was scared after these two incidents. Several of Judy's friends told the detectives that Judy had confided in them that she wanted to leave her husband. Though she had a premonition that something bad was happening around her, she stayed in the marriage for the sake of their daughter. Judy's family, however, were unaware of her feelings about all of this. By this time, Detective Bob Ball was almost certain that Bruce Moylan had killed his own wife and made it look like a hunting accident. But unfortunately, he did not have any physical evidence to prove it. Desperate, he called Dan Castle, a person who specialized in metal detectors and had assisted law enforcement on many occasions. Knowing that the fatal bullet was still somewhere in the woods, Detective Ball asked him to help find it. Dan got to work with his metal detector every day, but it seemed that he had finally met his match this time when he did not find anything after weeks of searching. The layers of snow had completely covered any trace of the bullet. Despite his failure, Dan was not ready to let go of this mission. Pursuing an experiment, Dan decided to use a slingshot to recreate the trajectory of the bullet in order to zero in on the exact location where the bullet could have gone. And in a stroke of luck, his idea worked. As he searched the general area where his marbles had ricocheted on the snow, he was finally able to find the bullet around 80 feet from the maple tree. Whilst the discovery was remarkable itself, authorities had yet to determine whether it was the same bullet that killed Judy or simply another that had been shot during the hunting season. Ray Kenny, a firearm examiner from Marquette State Police Crime Lab, was given the task of analyzing the bullet. He found some critical details within days. It was a .30 caliber round. From the moss and wood fibers, Kenny determined that it was the same bullet that struck the tree, but more evidence was trapped inside. Kenny found a tiny single pink fiber that belonged to the shirt Judy was wearing, as well as some black fiber that belonged to Judy's jacket. The link was finally made, and this was an incredible break in the case. The next target for the investigators was Bruce's notable gun collection. They tested all of the rifles that could have possibly fired the fatal bullet and identified 4 possible firearms. Bruce had nowhere to run but to tell the truth at this point, yet still he chose to lie. He denied owning any of those rifles, only to find that his luck had run out. In Judy and Bruce's financial records, there were loan papers where his gun collection was listed as collateral. Detectives also recovered an asset list which listed a gun that Bruce failed to disclose. The gun, which was a rifle with a scope, was consistent with one of the 4 possible rifles that could have fired that bullet. So eventually, investigators came to a conclusion about the firearm, theorizing that it was the most likely murder weapon. Detectives knew that finding out the truth was very crucial at this point. On April 23, 1993, 5 months into the investigation, Bruce finally agreed to take a polygraph test after months of making excuses and avoiding the process. During the initial phase of the polygraph, Bruce remained calm as he answered the investigators. Desperate to get the truth out of him, detectives placed the letter that came from Gail on the table in front of him. This proved to be the turning point of the interview, as Bruce was ready to tell a different story for the first time. Be it the realization that Gail was working with the police behind his back, or the fear that authorities had finally gotten to him, with tears in his eyes, Bruce finally confessed to murdering his wife after months of denial. He revealed that on the fatal day of November 29, 1992, he had seen the perfect opportunity to get rid of his wife. However, he also claimed that the first 2 times he spotted Judy through the trees, he aimed his gun but couldn't bring himself to shoot. The 3rd time, though, he closed his eyes and pulled the trigger, delivering the deadly blow. While sharing his motive for the murder, Bruce said Judy had threatened to divorce him and he simply didn't want to split up. In an effort to justify his actions, he said that Judy was a tyrant at work and at home, in addition to being a bad cook. About the murder weapon, Bruce claimed that he disposed of the rifle in a nearby river, but police could not find it after searching through the water. He was also able to correct an error in the medical examiner's report. While the report said Judy was shot in the left side of her chest, Bruce claimed that she was in fact shot in the right side of her chest and the bullet exited from the left side. This was a key point in his confession because he was able to point out something that would have only been known to the killer. Bruce Moylan was immediately arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Shockingly, despite his confession, he pleaded not guilty, claiming cops coerced the confession out of him. Although prosecutors had plenty of evidence against Bruce, they still decided to gather some more. In preparation for the trial, investigators had recreated the chimney block incident. Bruce had previously claimed that he accidentally moved it with his foot, but they determined it was too heavy and needed a deliberate push in order to fall off the roof. With dozens of witnesses and evidence, the trial mostly went in favor of the prosecution. While Bruce stayed put most of the time, he started crying when Gail took the stand. The defense, on the other hand, didn't have a single person to put on the stand. Bruce's lawyer, Thomas Castleman, claimed that all of his witnesses negated because of fear. He called the investigation a witch hunt and accused the cops of wrongfully obtaining the confession. As expected, the jury did not buy Bruce's story, and on December 15, 1993, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. On January 21, 1994, Bruce Moylan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The punishment brought solace to Judy's family, who had once even protested his innocence. Judy's brother and sister-in-law, David and Yvonne Blake, adopted 5-year-old Elise. So there you have it, the downfall of a man driven by his greed who assumed that he could pull off the perfect murder. Do you think if not for the diligent effort of the investigators, this murder would have always been considered a tragic accident? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories.